Welcome, everyone. Hello, good evening, and thank you for joining us. You are right now joining the MIT Executive MBA Application Tips. We are here to talk about our application, our process, and give you advice if you're looking at starting the journey this year. So we'll get started. My name is Sarah Massey. I'm Senior Associate Director for Admissions and Advising, working with the Executive MBA program at MIT Sloan. And I'm joined by my colleague, Andy. Andy, maybe say hello to everyone.
Hi, my name is Andy Leibel. I'm the Assistant Director of Admissions and Advising. I work very closely with Sarah, reviewing applications and onboarding our students once admitted.
Wonderful. So today we are going to provide you an overview so that you can meet and get to know our cohort, get to know the Executive MBA community. I'll give you an introduction to our application, and then we'll answer your questions. So we'll really tailor today, I hope, towards what you're curious about in the application process. And to get started, Andy will begin with Andy talking about the cohort in our current Executive MBAs.
Right. So to get started, we're first going to talk about how MIT Sloan, and the Executive MBA are all mission driven. It's central to everything we do and something unique about the Institute and our school. MIT Sloan is in a unique position because it's part of a larger research institute, and Sloan plays the role of translating innovations in science and management into organizational capabilities. The mission of MIT Sloan is to develop principled, innovative leaders who improve the world and to generate ideas that advance management practice. The Executive MBA makes a very special contribution to MIT because the students are in a position to immediately put what they learn into practice. And the mission of the MIT EMBA is to empowering and connecting leaders to redefine our shared future. So let's talk a little bit about the journey. The MIT EMBA is a 20-month experience where you come to campus 26 weekends. We consider a weekend Friday and Saturday every 2 to 3 weeks. There will also be 4 week-long modules and an international week-long project that is part of an executive lab course that takes place in about mid-March of your final year. Now that we've covered the basics, let's talk about our cohort and what our class looks like. These numbers change year over year just a little bit, but remain fairly similar as we pull this data. So picture yourself in a classroom of 126 global executives. The average years of experience in that classroom is 17, and the average age is 41. These averages come from a broad range, including as low as 10 years of work experience or as high as 30 years of work experience. So really to get that average. 56% of our students are non-local, traveling from outside of Massachusetts each class weekend to attend in person. 38% of the class is women, and 52% of the are of international origin, meaning they were born outside of the United States. 65% of our students hold an advanced degree of some kind, which could be an MD or a law degree or a PhD or a master's. 76% are at the director level of their organization and above. The one thing that 100% of our students have in common, of course, is that they are fully employed. So the industry breakdown is from a vast array of industries for our class. These first 4 industries are consistently the top groups throughout the years, but our percentages will fluctuate as we go through, depending on what's happening in the world. So in 2023, the number 1 industry was healthcare and hospitals. And if you remember what was happening at the time when those students were applying to the class of 2023, you might realize why it was healthcare and hospitals. The next year, more people applied from the software and technology space, and the number 1 industry in the class of 2025 is banking and financial services. You'll also notice here that the category of other is a significant percentage, which is very typical. We have students from all different industries, such as manufacturing, entertainment, law, energy, transportation, etc. It's important that we have all of these unique perspectives represented. As we said before, 76% are director level and above, but we also include manager and individual contributor levels. And if you're an entrepreneur, you might be interested to see that 10% of our class is full-time entrepreneurs. Our students come from companies that range in size, anywhere from more than 10,000 employees to fewer than 25 employees. There is no right company. Every company or organization that you've worked for in the past or are currently working for will provide a unique perspective to bring to the cohort. And our students come from all over. You'll remember I said that 56% come from outside of Massachusetts, 10% are coming internationally, and the rest are coming domestically. Now, those international students are coming from anywhere as close as Canada to as far away as South Korea, Colombia, France, and the UAE, etc. All right, so now that we've covered what our class looks like, let's talk about what the minimum requirements for the attributes of an MIT EMBA student look like for your candidacy. The MIT EMBA student has at least 10 years of work experience. For candidates with 10 to 13 years of experience, you might find the application especially competitive. For those in this category, it helps to objectively consider what experiences and responsibilities you have had, which are unique. Successful candidates earlier in their career will have had a steeper trajectory than that of their peers. The minimum requirements, you'll have leadership experience as well. This might mean that you are managing a business division or department, which usually means that you're responsible for budget, strategy, or development of people. Or you're an executive level contributor, which means you're a thought leader in your organization or industry, a leader who mentors or develops others, and someone who is involved in the strategy of your organization. We like to describe our students as quant comfortable, but this in no way means that you need to be an engineer or a mathematician. This means that we'll be looking at your transcripts for one course in statistics and one course in calculus with a grade of B or better. There are circumstances where we might suggest you sign up for a statistics or calculus course from one of our approved programs in advance while you're applying. If you have questions, I suggest reaching out to emba.admissions@mit.edu about finding the appropriate course. Additionally, you should be receiving organizational support. We need to know that your company understands the commitment of the program, supports your time on campus, and your journey. Because of the emphasis on action learning in our curriculum, your organization needs to be aware of what you're taking on. While these qualities are the requirements for the MIT EMBA, an ideal candidate will also be an innovator, a proponent of change, who consistently challenges the status quo. This means combining a strong leadership performance, global perspective, functional expertise, and of course, innovation. Now, Sarah will provide an intro to our application.
Okay, thanks, Andy, and hello again, everyone. This is really the subject of today, talking about our application. I hope that many of you have looked at the application online. We opened just a couple of weeks ago on October 1st. With the first deadlines coming up. So you can, if you haven't looked at it yet, you can take a peek after this session, but I'll walk you through some of the components and how to think about putting it together. The application is the first step in the admissions process, right? So after you submit your application, we have interviews and then the final review by the admissions committee. So I'm going to start by talking about the application itself. You'll find essays in the application. You might notice in this year's application and last year's application, we've actually moved to more short form essays, fewer long form essays and more short form essays. We're getting right to the point, right to the crux of the question and diving, in your essays. The challenge will be to dive into what was important about this topic. We know you can't cover all the details. That's okay, right? Make sure to include specifics in there, and we'll have a lot to talk about in your interview as well. So remember to include detail. Remember that we're going to read all of your essays, so you don't need to repeat content. And you can really think about all of the essays combined and the application combined as one narrative. So describe situations really briefly. Try not to overuse the word we, right? The admissions committee often will be curious about what your specific role is in a situation. And we know that you're working in groups, and so try to suss out your role versus others. Most importantly, though, and this is right, Andy and I and the rest of the admissions committee read many, many essays, right? We've read thousands of essays over the years. And the thing that really stands out the most is when you are authentic to yourself. It does show if you're trying to be the perfect candidate that you think someone else is trying to read, it does actually show through, right? Those essays are less memorable, and they tend not to show what your particular strengths are as well. So overall, be yourself, right? So that's what I'll say about the essays. The next component, this is much simpler. We are going to ask a lot of questions about your employment history and the organization that you work currently in. And so part of this will be you'll upload a resume, you'll upload an organization chart for your current organization. Here's one example. Your organization might look different, absolutely. But the thing that I'll point out about this organization chart is that you can use the one that comes from your company if it represents well, but go in there and edit it just to highlight yourself, right? You can go on a PDF editor, add a highlighter, or even print it out if you need to and scan it and put a highlighter so that we can easily find you and your direct supervisor and your recommenders. I know this is a pretty simple version of an org chart, so it would be fairly easy to find someone on this. But when we're reading a lot, some get very complicated, and save us the time of searching for where you are in here. We'll ask a lot of detailed questions, so it's pretty straightforward in this part of the application, right? Just fill out for employment history and all that. They're very straightforward questions. You're just kind of getting the details there. What we are looking for, you're putting in the details. What we're looking for is the story of your career. It's why we ask about what you have done before your current job. When we're looking at your organization here, it's not to see how many people report to you, right? It's so that we can have an understanding based on you're talking to us in your essays about what it is that you're doing and your goals. Your recommenders are talking to us about your achievements and your potential. And this helps us to understand the ecosystem and the context in which you're working in the organization, where where your influence is. The org chart really shows the formal reporting lines. You probably have dotted line relationships and all kinds of other things that you can certainly talk about. There's an additional information section on these pages, on the page of the application that talks about work history. And so you can add context in there. Don't leave us wondering if you think that there's something we won't understand. All right, enough about your work history and employment history. We're also going to ask about your academic background. And so there is a section on the application where you'll input any school that you've gone to. And and that is really institutions where you were enrolled as a degree student, right? And so these are schools that you have transcripts for. There is another place in the application if you have certificates, or additional education, professional education. But these are really for schools where you were enrolled and getting a degree. List them, any degrees that you have. We are going to look, these are bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, PhDs, etc. We're going to look on here at your overall academic background. We are really open to a variety. MIT is not just a school for engineers, right? This is the management school. And so we'll certainly see a lot of engineers, and we welcome you and we're looking forward to you. And we'll have history majors and political science and journalists and a variety, and people coming with a variety of academic backgrounds. We will look on your transcripts for one course in statistics and one course in calculus. If they're under a different name or if there's some context we should know about that, make sure to include that in your additional information or highlight that. If you've not taken calculus or statistics at the college level, then go ahead and enroll in a credit-bearing course now. Like Andy said earlier, you can email emba.admissions for advice on a course, but as long as it's at an accredited institution and it's a credit-bearing course, you just want to take one, get a B or better, and that is going to go a long way in helping you to prepare for the program, but also in boosting your application. We will just, for transcripts, we're just asking for digital copies as part of the application, and then we'll get the officials after you come in. If you went to an international school, make sure that it is translated and certified by a certified translating company. And then for transcripts, that's it. That's fairly simple. Now, I see that people are starting to put questions in the Q&A, which I love. We are going to be looking at this. And I'll ask Andy, I should have maybe mentioned this earlier. I'll ask Andy to let me know if any questions are coming up while I'm on a slide that we should dive into before I move on. Otherwise, we'll talk about a few more components of the application, and then we'll just get deep into the questions. Okay, so Andy, please interrupt me if you think if there's something I should cover before we move on. And for now, I'll talk about the letters of recommendation. This is actually a pretty significant part of your application. We require 2 letters of recommendation. One should be from a current supervisor or superior. This letter is essentially showing us that your organization supports your participation in the program. And for most of you, right, this is the organization that you intend to be working at while you're in the program, right? We talked, I think Andy talked a little bit about that connection between your work and the curriculum and how it really is cyclical. So you're going to be working while you're here. We want to know that your organization both has, both knows that you're doing this. There are some Fridays that you'll be away, so they need to be aware, but also, right, that they're supportive of a learning environment for you and providing additional challenges and place to apply the curriculum. The second recommender can be anyone. It should be a mentor or former boss. It can be from your current company. It could be an executive sponsor, a mentor at your current company. It could be a former boss from a different organization, someone who knows your potential well. I recommend, and maybe this is fairly obvious to some of you, I recommend someone who's more senior versus someone who versus sometimes peers might work, right, if you're in a more senior position, but I don't recommend using people who report into you, and that's probably the simplest. Do talk to them and coach them about what your deadlines are, about why you want to be part of the Executive MBA program, and make sure that they're kind of familiar with the work that you've been doing lately, especially if it's somebody that you worked with more in the past. Okay, that's recommenders. We also include throughout the application, we include space for you to provide additional information. So if any of the material we're asking about or any of the questions that we're asking lead you to think, they might wonder this, whether it's about your grade, right? Whether it's about your grades in undergrad, whether it's about a gap that you had on your resume. If there's anything that we might notice that we might wonder about, just write a little note in the additional information and clear that up, provide the context. I say on that, addressing a topic is always better than leaving it hanging. You can also, in the additional information, you can share something that perhaps there's something that you're really proud of or something that is really important to you as a person that we're not directly asking about. Well, we do want to know that. We're admitting whole people, and so include that in the application if it doesn't fit in elsewise. Okay. These are the components of the application, and now we get to the exciting part after you submit. Our interviews are by invitation. So within a month of submitting your application round deadline, you'll hear from us with an update which will either be a final decision or an invitation to move forward in the process and interview with us on campus. So the invitations are going to be based on the round in which you apply. If you go to our website or the application, you'll see our application timetable. giving you the date by which you'll hear after you apply, depending on the round in which you submit. So interviews on campus, they're with 2 members of the admissions committee. Interviews themselves are about 2 hours, but then we will also invite you to lunch on campus. And so, you'll reserve about a half a day, right? About 2 hours for the interview itself, and then, maybe an hour and a half for lunch. Great. After your interviews are the final review. This is by our full admissions committee, and then we share final decisions always after the full committee review. We also provide on the website the date by which you will have a final decision after an interview. Okay, tips from us. I mentioned earlier that we have seen thousands of applicants over the years, and so what have we noticed that really stands out? There are 3 things that I think can really help if you use them just as a center, as a guide. The first I mentioned already, tell your story. The application is a narrative, and it should be unique to you. What's authentically motivating you to invest your time, right? Your time, your finances, your attention, which is really valuable in us in coming to MIT and getting this education. What are you trying to achieve? What are you working on? And how can we help you, right? That story should be really authentic to you and should really read through the application, which I promise we do read cover to cover. Andy, what would you say?
I would say the next bullet that we have is review with someone outside your industry. Make sure that some of those more technical jargon that you might use in your day-to-day within your organization and at your company can be understood by anybody reading your application. Some of us might not be as familiar with your processes, and so making that clear to those who are reviewing your application by reviewing it with someone outside your industry will be immensely helpful.
Yeah, really good. I would also say, we talked in the beginning of, well, Andy did. Andy talked about our mission, right? The mission of MIT Sloan and the mission of the Executive MBA program. And we really are a mission-driven organization. And so I think it goes a long way for you, right? And kind of solidifying what your own motivations are, to reflect on our mission and how that ties into your own personal mission and your own personal goals. That we'll see through the process. All right, so those are our tips. I mentioned our application rounds and tables. I'll hold it up here for just a few minutes if you want to screenshot or take a picture of it, but it is available online. So I'll hold that up in case you're looking at it. The date that I will point out now, because we are in October still, is our first early round application deadline. So if you submit by December 5th, you'll have a decision. You'll have a final decision if interviewed by February 14th. And so that's the first round that and date that I would really highlight here. Final round is the final round should be submitted by May 8th. Okay, so really anytime between December and May. Hopefully we'll see a lot of you in the first early round. Okay. There we go. Now we're getting into the good part, your own questions. And so Andy, maybe you've been scrolling through if you and see some questions that we should jump to. I also, for any of you on here, we're using the Q&A format. That's how we're asking and answering questions. And there's an option in there to upvote questions. So if somebody asks something that you also want an answer to, give it a thumbs up and it'll move it to the top of the pile.
Yeah, we left plenty of time for questions, so I have several flagged. Let's start with Nikita is asking, what if you have a similar rank or higher without reports? Does it have to be a manager role?
Oh, you mean, I assume the question means, do you have to have people management or direct supervision in order to be qualified to apply? And to that, I would answer that no, not necessarily. It depends. The majority of our students do have people management roles. But that's not a strict definition. Essentially, what we're looking for is a general management experience and perspective. So you should have leadership experience. You probably should have managed someone in some context. Whether you do right now or not kind of depends on what your role is. There are individual contributors or individual contributors who are quite senior in some organizations. In many organizations, the head of strategy or the head of strategy might have no headcount, but a pretty significant role in some organizations, right? And so that is absolutely okay. We're really looking at the context of what it is that you're doing and bringing to the table. If you've never managed anyone and yet, then I would say maybe get a little bit more experience first, right? Okay.
All right. Rupesh is asking if MIT MBA is considered a STEM program.
Oh, yes, yeah, it is. The MBA, so the degree is an MBA, right? The executive part is the format and the format and the program in which you're getting the MBA. And MBA degrees at MIT Sloan are STEM, which is significant for those of you who are domestic students. That might not be obvious why that's significant, but for international students, that's a little bit more significant if you're interested in working in the US after your degree. Okay, what else do we have?
All right. For a founder of an organization with no manager, can a letter of recommendation of an advisor be okay?
Oh, such a good question. That is really relevant. Yeah, if you are an entrepreneur or an owner of your organization, you're probably not going to have a boss. You might have an investor, you might have a board member, you might have a co-founder or business partner. If you do have any of those, they are ideal for that quote unquote boss's letter. And if you don't have one of those, perhaps a really key customer or key stakeholder. But in most cases, you'll be able to find either a co-founder, a board member, or an investor. Great. What else do we have?
All right. What if my past company or employer has been absorbed or is not in existence? What should I do in that situation?
Oh, great. Make a note of it. That's a perfect example of something for the additional information section. So, you'll still be listing it on your work history because it did exist while you were working there. And then in the additional information section, please do make a note of that so that we do conduct background checks after you're admitted. And so it's helpful to know ahead of time. We'll send that information off, and that's kind of helpful context. But yeah, that happens. We see that a lot, particularly if you've worked in a lot of startups. There's a lot of turnover in mergers and acquisitions.
All right. Akiko is asking, would you mind elaborating on organization commitment? If I'm on special leave from my employer for personal family reasons while I'm interested in pursuing the degree, is that meeting this requirement?
That's a really good question. I would say if you're on a leave from your organization right now, it's well, if you're planning to be on leave during the time that you would be enrolled in the program, then it's probably not the right timing, right? We do want you to be working while you're in the program because the curriculum is really very much built around that cycle and the assumption that you have a place to apply currently. So if you're on leave right now, you might want to delay a little bit. There are other programs even at MIT for right. So if you're taking or looking for a year leave of absence from work, the Sloan Fellows MBA program also takes mid-career at MIT, also takes mid-career professionals. That is a 12-month program where you're full-time. And so you can take a 12-month leave from your work, be full-time living on campus in the Sloan Fellows program. And that would be my recommendation if you're not working. Otherwise, if it's the EMBA you're looking for, I would time it so that you're in a role that really gives you that learning, that full cycle learning.
All right,
What
we have
else
a
do we have?
couple of questions. I answered one of these already by typing in the Q&A, but I just want to address the group who's asking about GMAT, GRE, and executive assessment scores. So I don't know if you want to take that, Sarah, or if you want me to jump in and say they are not required.
You've got that. You have the right answer, Andy.
Yeah. If you do have the GMAT, GRE, and EA scores, you can submit them for consideration. They are completely optional. The admissions committee will review them, and they can take into consideration a very strong score for the statistics and calculus quantitative requirement. However, it needs to be in the highest of percentiles. A lot of times it is still worth it to take the statistics and calculus courses as a refresher as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
All
Good.
right.
What else do we have?
Does it matter which round you apply for for the exception rates? And what are the biggest advantages of applying in the earlier versus later rounds?
Good question, relevant. For the admissions odds rates, I would say most of the rounds, right? If for most of the rounds, I wouldn't worry too much about the difference in acceptance rates. I would try, if you can, if there's no other outside factors getting in your way, I would recommend applying before the final round, right? We're absolutely not going to run out of seats before the final round, right? But I would recommend applying before the final round if you can. It gives you a little bit more room, more optionality in interviewing, a little bit more space, right, where we're building the class. Gives you more potential to be kind of the first person. If you're in a big company, maybe applying in the first round gives you the opportunity possibly to be the first person from your company instead of the third person from your company applying. So there's some benefit to an earlier round. For the most part, up through April, I would say do what fits you and your recommenders and being ready the best. And yeah, the benefits, right? The benefits, as I said, it's really kind of being that those early applicants will be the foundation of our class. And when we're building that diversity of industries and functions and backgrounds, right? You'll be in the foundation and the scaffolding, right? Versus perhaps, it does happen, and this is not to scare anybody, apply in the last round if you're ready, right? But this is, there are in every year, depending on what's going on in the economy, right? In some years, we might have a lot of applications from physicians this year, or a lot of applications from the fintechs, right? From this type of fintech this year, a lot, right? And so, applying earlier gives you a little bit of an advantage there. I would say primarily for people who need, if you're looking for financial sponsorship, going earlier gives you more time to build that as well. What else do we have?
Let's see. I have no formal education. Is that a problem? I live in the world of startups, finance, statistics, and calculus.
Okay, well, so we do require a bachelor's degree or a bachelor's degree equivalent, except in extraordinary circumstances. And so we will review your application even if you don't have a bachelor's degree. And we're going to look for significant professional accomplishments. We're also going to ask you to take that credit-bearing statistics course and credit-bearing calculus course at least. We do want to see that you've at least taken some college level coursework for credit. But we have seen some quite extraordinary people who, for one reason or another, are quite accomplished in the business world and have not, did not get the chance to go to complete their bachelor's degree or bachelor's equivalent. And we will look at your application. So that's my answer to that.
Connor didn't see a military category. Is there a percentage of federal government in the cohort? And if so, what is the preferred time in the military for applicants?
Oh yeah, really great question. So the class that just matriculated a few weeks ago, our class of 2026, has out of the 126 in that class, we have 11 who are either veterans or veterans of the U.S. military or active duty still. So we do actually we see active duty as well as veterans in this program, and they're a really strong part of our community year after year, the veteran community. If you have questions about VA funding, things like that, I'm happy to, we can absolutely help get you connected and get more information. You can reach us at emba.admissions@mit.edu. Great. What else?
All right. Do we have any application tips for re-applicants?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. Because we are looking at such a wide range of years and experience levels. It does absolutely happen that someone will apply, and they might not, right? They might not quite be ready. They might not be admitted the first time, and with more experience, a promotion, something changed in the application. You can be successful with a reapplication, and we encourage that. So, what I would say to focus on, there's no one single answer, but this is the general advice that I would say if you're thinking about a reapplication. Look at either look at what has changed or could, right, at what has changed in your professional life, right? So you might want to wait until you're in a new role or have more management experience or broader general management perspective. So it could be something like that. Perhaps you might want to re-review your recommenders, right? Where you are in the organization and the organizational support, right? Take a look at all of those components. If you didn't have those courses the first time, take a look at those courses, and take a look at the courses. And then when you're putting your next application together, the big focus for us is just, what do you see as the difference between the last time you applied and now?
I'm going to try to
What else?
combine two questions that are about a similar topic.
Okay.
So Ramdev is asking, for people coming in from far away, how common are absences due to travel restrictions related to climate, weather, or how does the school manage these absences? And someone else is asking, what do you do if you have to take a break through the program for marriage or other personal reasons?
Okay, yeah, both of these are about how the real world is not always predictable, and it is the real world. So yeah, really relevant questions. Because you might have seen on one of Andy's slides that 70% of our students are not in Massachusetts. They don't live in Massachusetts. And so during the winter, when there's ice and snow, yeah, it's possible that we could have a snow day, or that your flight is canceled, or something gets in the way of you being here. We have had I'm knocking on all the wood around here, whether I believe in superstition or not. But we've had really good luck in the past few years of having, of not having snow days on EMBA weekends. But that doesn't mean that we haven't had individuals who've had their flights disrupted and things like that. We record all of our classes, so all EMBA classes only because of the type of schedule that we have in your commutes. We record them, and they're also live streamed. So when that emergency happens, you're not falling behind in the coursework, and you're not falling behind on that lecture. And then you'll email your faculty, let them know what happened, and work on a plan to catch up on anything. So that works for kind of those unexpected, unplanned. You'll be here most of the time, but that one that you just couldn't avoid. And then for, if something happens while you're in the program and you need to take a leave, you would be able to take a leave of absence. In the EMBA program, they are in time periods of 1 year because our curriculum is lockstep. But people like Andy or myself, advisors on our team, will work with you if you are enrolled in the program and you have a personal situation. We will work with you to find the best solution for you. Life happens. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a couple of people asking about MIT and do they provide financial assistance?
Yeah. Okay. So we do have several fellowships programs for executive MBA students. they're quite competitive, right? So the majority of EMBA students are funded either, 20 to 25% are funded primarily by their organizations. About half, right? About 40% are taking out personal loans or private loans. Right. And so people are really kind of many are using a combination of different funding sources. Our fellowships are right? That's kind of the financial aid is really fellowships and loans. Our fellowships we have several different categories. Really, they're aimed at helping us to ensure that we have the best, most diverse class, bringing perspectives from across industries. So several of our fellowships are targeted towards specific backgrounds and perspectives, like our Forte Fellowship that is in collaboration with the Forte Foundation, which supports 2 women each year coming into the program who've shown particular potential in leadership. We have a fellowship from an alumni, our Pachasik Fellowship, which is targeted towards people from non-traditional working backgrounds. So people who work in nonprofits or government, right, to help assist with your tuition there. So we do have several there. All of them are going to be, right, somewhere between $5,000 and $40,000, right? So we're looking at, that's kind of the average percentage. Great.
Wonderful.
What else do we have?
For international students, what is the visa situation? What can be offered? Is it at F1 or J1?
All right. Great. Hello to all of our potential international students here. Yes, we do. MIT will sponsor. If you're an international student, you're working internationally, then you will need a student visa in order to enroll. MIT will sponsor. In my experience, in the past 10 years, all EMBA students always choose F1 visas. That's the standard. If you are sponsored by either your home government or your organization, you could choose to do the J1 visa. For most EMBAs, that's not preferable because of some different restrictions that it has, but we can sort that out with you when the time comes.
All right. Once the application is submitted, will it remain available for reference, or are we able to print the entire application as a PDF?
So once you submit it, it's not available for print or reference. Now, once you submit it, you do kind of hand it over to us. So I actually recommend for your own reference, it can be really helpful to, the essays, to save a copy of your essays, right? It's helpful to have a draft of it somewhere outside for spell check and, just as you're drafting. And then make sure you have a file with the resumes that you submitted and the transcripts that you submitted, all that kind of material. Put it all in one folder, and that can be really helpful when you're preparing for your interview too. Good. What else do we have?
Let's see. Can the org chart be focused on my specific offering portfolio, or does it need to be the whole company or at the company level?
That is a great question. We really want to see the whole organization. So now, when you're in a large organization, I recognize how complex that gets, right? But it should show the vertical of it should show all the way to the CEO or board. Now, if you're in a large organization, you're probably going to have less details the farther it gets from you, right? So you might, if let's just say as an example, you're in the sales organization, you might show the CEO and then, everyone who reports directly to the CEO. And for most of them, you might just show, approximately how many people are in that division, right? How many people report into them or what the size of that division. And that's it, right? So, if you're in the sales organization, you might just have, the chief legal officer and, how big that is, right? As you get down your own vertical, you're going to have more and more detail there. So we want to be able to see you, the detailed part should be your unit. So your boss's peers, right, as individuals should be on there. Now, if they have big units, you don't need to go into all the details of their units. It might just say kind of, might just summarize kind of who reports into them. But yourself, all of your direct peers, we want individually identified on there. And if they have organizations reporting into them, you can kind of summarize that. And then yourself and your own organization reporting into you in detail. Hope that makes sense. The farther away it gets for you, the more you can kind of summarize what's on those wings. But the idea is that we're looking not just at a head count, but to understand the organization as a whole, right? So your recommenders, who are those other, where are as you're talking to us in an interview, right? You're talking about a person or a department or a situation. Where are they in this org chart, right? Will we be able to see them even if they don't have a direct line to you? Great. Now I know we're getting very close to the end of our time with you here today. So Andy, do you see any questions that we should, we probably could get to one more question. I don't know if there's a good closer or good final question before we wrap up tonight.
I picked this question because we get it a lot.
Okay.
And it's a difficult question to answer, however, but what is the average ratio of applications to admissions for the EMBA program?
Oh, interesting. We don't share the rate of admission. It's not a number that we share, but I will say this. We spend a lot of time, we really, really try to spend a lot of time working with you along the path to steer you towards applying when you're ready and at the right time for you. So we do a lot to steer our pipeline towards helping people to understand, helping people to understand where an application is realistic. If you have not had a call with an admissions advisor yet, I recommend doing that. It can be really helpful as you're planning out the process. And then for the interview stage, once we're inviting you to an interview, it really does mean that we see potential in your application. And our aim is for more than half of the people who are coming in for an interview to be admitted. So we hope that it feels like a really realistic next step. Good. So that was our closing question. I do hope, I often, when we get the rates of admission question, I think it comes from do I have a chance? And I think I'll give you advice that I've given to a lot of people over the years, which is don't exclude yourself, right? Don't say no to yourself. You might get in, right? Think about the chance. I really say, don't sell yourself short, and don't say no preemptively, right? Because the answer might be yes. All right. To get more information and for the next steps in the process, we have more events coming up. So there are some online. You'll see Thursday, November 7th, a LinkedIn Live with some of our current students. I definitely recommend hearing from students who are in the program to get their perspective on the experience. But we have some in-person sessions as well. We're going to be on the road. We have colleagues in Manhattan next week on Tuesday. So if you're in the New York area, you can meet some of our colleagues and alumni there as well. We'll be in Las Vegas, Denver, and Mexico City in November. So if you're near any of those cities, in Mexico, we'll be in Mexico City, and then it's not listed here, but later on that week, we'll be in Monterrey. So if you're anywhere near there, come by and see us. And then on November 20th, a masterclass with Scott Stern, who teaches our strategy course for executive MBAs.
All of those events are posted to the website as they are confirmed. So while those are the next 6, they are not the final events that are happening.
That's a really good point. Keep checking as we go through the season. We'll add more. Thank you all so much for spending your Wednesday evening with us. I look forward to hearing from you. I hope I'll see many of you at events over the next couple of months, and I hope that I'll see your applications in December. Okay, have a wonderful evening.